Hello everyone, this is Dr. Nisha Nujumudeen. The topic of discussion for the day is inflation targeting. It is an important topic of discussion for prelims as well as mains examination. So now, having said that, what is inflation? Price rise. Target means what? A kind of aim or kind of setting one particular objective so as to achieve it. So now, inflation targeting in simple term means some sort of targets or ceilings or limits in order to control what? Price rise or inflation. So now, inflation targeting is actually a monetary policy framework that is actually adopted by the central bank of our country, India, that is RBI. So as to keep inflation within certain prescribed limits or targets. This particular inflation targeting, why did this concept come up? If you see, inflation or price rise kept on increasing in our country, India. It became difficult for the authorities to control them. So in the year 2016, it was decided to target or control inflation within certain prescribed standards or limits. Having said that, a committee called as Monetary Policy Committee was put forward in the year 2016. This was done under the chairmanship of the then Deputy Governor, Mr. Urjit Patel. So now, always if you see, there has been conflicts between the decisions taken by RBI for our country and the decisions taken by Ministry of Finance, Government of India. So to overcome such kind of conflicts on issues like interest rates, inflation, a committee called as Monetary Policy Committee was put forward. In this particular committee, there were total 6 members, 3 from RBI and 3 from Government of India. And now, though you have 6 members with equal bifurcation from RBI and Government of India also, the highest power for taking any decisions through Monetary Policy Committee on topics or issues like inflation, interest rate, that is repo rate, etc., the highest power goes to RBI Governor. So out of the 3 members of RBI Governor, Deputy Governor and 1 expert will be there. RBI Governor has the highest power to finalize any decisions in the Monetary Policy Committee. Now, in the year 2016, for the very first time, it was decided that India will start targeting or limiting what? Price rise, called as inflation targeting within certain prescribed limits or standards. And that is how this particular topic called as inflation targeting came up. And now it was said that inflation, it will be targeted at the rate of 4% with plus or minus tolerance band of 2%. What is that? Let me quickly simplify for you. 4% with plus or minus tolerance band of 2% means 2, 4, 6. That's all in simple terms. Which means that when we target inflation, the ideal rate of price rise for a country like India should be 4%. So 4 is actually the ideal rate of inflation, which means if inflation is 4%, it is good. Not too bad, not too high. It is in an adjustable level. Whereas 6 is what? The maximum level of inflation, which means that up to 6% inflation can increase in our country, India, but not more than 6%. Then it causes serious problem. So 6 is the maximum limit or level of inflation targeting. And now what is 2? 2 is the minimum level beyond which inflation should not decrease. That is because inflation is actually good for a country, especially for what? A developing economy like India. Which means that it is a natural and a necessary characteristics. For example, inflation of 1.8 or 1.99. This is not advisable. Minimum level of inflation India should have is at least 2%. Ideal is what? 4%. And the maximum level up to which inflation can increase in our country India is 6%, not beyond that. This is called as inflation targeting rate. Now, from 2016 till 2023, this 4% with plus or minus tolerance band of 2% was followed. In March 2023, this particular limits was done. And from April 2023, in the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, they had a discussion whether they should change what? The levels of inflation targeting, or should they increase the limit and all. But by that time, it was very evident that because of COVID-19 pandemic reasons and all, it was very, very difficult to control or target inflation. So they decided till 2026, the same inflation targeting levels. What is that? 4% with plus or minus tolerance band of 2% will be followed. So now even today, the same rates of inflation targeting, that is within this range only, inflation can increase and decrease. And the ideal rate is what? The best rate is 4%. Having said that, what is the current affairs of inflation with regard to our country, India? If you see in the month of October, what was the inflation rate? September month's rate was published on October, right? So if you see in September 2024, the inflation rate was 9.24%, the food inflation exclusively, and the total inflation rate, it was 5.2%. Now, on September-October, that is September-October-November, on November 2024, you know what is inflation rate? It has become 6.2%. Now, what is the target of inflation? It is said that more than 6%, it is not advisable to increase inflation. But as for the recent data, it is said that inflation is more than 6%, which means 6.2%. This shows that we are not following the inflation targeting levels. But now, because of inflation targeting only, the RBI is trying to bring inflation down to what? Down to the prescribed limit of 246. That is 4% with plus or minus tolerance band of 2%. Because we have the target, we are able and we are trying to bring down these inflation rates. How? By regulating the interest rates in our country, India. This particular inflation targeting, it is indeed very, very important because not only India, other countries are also following it. For example, New Zealand, that was the very first country to adopt what? Inflation targeting. Australia, many other countries have adopted inflation targeting. So India also felt that we have to follow such kind of global practices. That is why inflation targeting was brought in. In spite of having such kind of targeted levels of inflation for our country, India, still India is not able to keep up the limits. And now it was said that for the year 2023-24, inflation will be brought down to 4.2%. But now suddenly a surge in inflation. If you see the food inflation as for October-November 2024 data stands at 10.8%. In September it was only 9.4%, which is very high. Instead of decreasing, it has come to 10.8% is the food inflation. Where is India going? Oh God, this becomes a very serious question mark, right? So from this, what do we understand? We are not able to target our inflation as what we want. But because of inflation targeting, which is a monetary policy framework or tool, RBI is trying to control what? The levels of inflation. So this is why a country requires inflation targeting. Now, having said that, this particular inflation target in the textbooks, they'll give you like 4 plus or minus band of 2. Don't get confused. It is just that 2, 4, 6. You learn like this. 4 is idle, 2 is minimum level, 6 is maximum. Is it clear? That is the most simplified way of studying inflation targeting. Now, in the very same year 2016 only, the Monetary Policy Committee decided to adopt Consumer Price Index, that is CPI, as the most important indicator of inflation. In simple terms, to measure inflation, the price of goods and service will be taken into consideration at a retail level or at a consumer level. That is called as Consumer Price Index in simple terms. Okay. So now that was also decided when in the 2016 Monetary Policy Committee meeting along with adopting flexible inflation targeting. This inflation targeting is also called as flexible inflation targeting. For the very first time, a country, India, had a formal inflation targeting mechanism since 2016. If you see, since 1980s, even before that, 50s to 80s also, there was something called as credit planning. Okay, there was no inflation targeting, but credit planning. saying that inflation has to be kept within so and so range. Then in the mid 1980s to 2010 and all, we had something called as monetary policy framework of growth with stability. It was said that inflation must be within 5 to 7%. But an official formal inflation targeting tool called as inflation targeting was not there. That came in which year? 2016 only. Until today, we follow that. Is it clear? No matter if inflation is increasing more than 6% also, because of inflation targeting, we are able to bring it to certain limited targets as what our country India has put for us. Having said that, there are advantages as well as disadvantages for inflation targeting. One of the biggest advantages, because of such kind of inflation targeting tools, there is a huge credibility. Second is the transparency. The policymakers know what is happening and they're able to put forward objectives and targets accordingly. And now this is making it more convenient for the investors to invest, reducing the uncertainty in the economy. What could be the level of inflation tomorrow? All the uncertainty is not there. They're able to understand what is the rate of inflation, to what extent it can increase and when it can come down. And similarly, there is a huge long-term focus and flexibility through such kind of inflation targeting rates. Because if you see 246, within this range, we can increase and decrease inflation based on the economic conditions. All these are what the advantages of inflation targeting. But again, every coin has a good side and a bad side. Similarly, the disadvantage of inflation targeting is many a times we can see socio-economic impact that has been happening because of such kind of inflation targeting. And sometimes you can even see unbalanced or uneven growth, because inflation targeting is what certain levels have to be attained, right? So regional disparities, many a times it occurs because of such kind of inflation targeting. And now, lack of availability of proper data with regard to inflation, because monthly we calculate what? Inflation. So that is also another reason which makes it difficult to target inflation. And the volatility or the fluctuations in the exchange rate. That is also a disadvantage of what? Inflation targeting. For the mains practice writing, this is a very important topic. What do you understand by inflation targeting? Explain the pros and cons, that is advantage and disadvantage of inflation targeting, because that is adopted by a country India, inflation targeting. So what are the pros and cons of inflation targeting by RBI for achieving macroeconomic stability in our country India? You can actually practice this question. And for the prelims perspective, they will ask you only with regard to what? The so-called inflation rates for plus or minus tolerance band of 2%. Based on that only questions can come. I hope inflation targeting is crystal clear for all of you. Feel free to put your comments in the comment box. Thank you and Jai Hind.